My sister-in-law stole my breast milk because she couldn't produce enough, but refused to ask for help. She went nuts when I put a lock on my freezer. My sister-in-law and I gave birth 3 weeks apart. Her name was Odette, and she married my husband's older brother about 5 years ago. We were never close, but we were cordial at family events. When we found out we were both pregnant at the same time, everyone said it was fate, and our children would grow up like siblings. I thought maybe this would bring us closer together. I was wrong. From the beginning, Odette made everything a competition. She announced her pregnancy at my baby shower because she said she couldn't wait any longer. She complained when I chose a nursery theme similar to hers, even though I picked mine first. She got upset when my registry had some of the same items as hers because she said I was copying her. I ignored most of it because I didn't have the energy to fight while growing a human. After the babies were born, things got worse. Odette had trouble with breastfeeding. Her milk supply was low and her son wasn't latching properly. The pediatrician suggested supplementing with formula, but Odette refused. She said formula was poison, and she would never give her child anything artificial. She said breast milk was the only acceptable option, and she would figure it out. I had the opposite problem. I produced more milk than my daughter could drink. I pumped constantly and stored the extra in my freezer. I had bags and bags of frozen breast milk labeled with dates. I was proud of my supply and relieved that I wouldn't have to worry if something happened and I couldn't nurse for a day or two. Odette knew about my freezer stash because I mentioned it at a family dinner. She asked how much I had, and I told her I had enough to feed my daughter for weeks if I needed to. She got quiet after that and changed the subject. A few weeks later, my mother-in-law started hosting weekly family dinners again. She wanted the cousins to bond and the family to stay connected. My husband and I would bring our daughter and spend a few hours at his parents' house every Sunday. Odette and her husband did the same with their son. I noticed Odette would disappear into the kitchen a lot during these dinners. She said she was checking on the babies or getting water or looking for something she left behind. I didn't think much of it. Then I started noticing my freezer stash was shrinking. I counted my bags obsessively because I wanted to track my supply. Every Monday morning after Sunday dinner, I would find fewer bags than I remembered. At first, I thought I was miscounting. Then I thought maybe my husband used some without telling me. He said he didn't. I thought maybe I was losing my mind from sleep deprivation. The bags kept disappearing, 5 or 6 at a time, always after Sunday dinners. I mentioned it to my husband, and he said I was probably just using more than I realized. I knew I wasn't. I knew exactly how much my daughter ate and how much I pumped, and the math wasn't adding up. Something was wrong. The next Sunday, I stayed home with a headache and sent my husband to dinner without me. I told him to pay attention to Odette and see if she did anything strange. He came home and said she seemed disappointed I wasn't there. He said she kept asking when I would feel better and if I would come next week. He said she went to the kitchen multiple times, but he didn't see anything unusual. The following Sunday, I went to dinner, but I watched Odette carefully. I saw her go to the kitchen with her large diaper bag. I waited a few minutes and then followed her. She wasn't in the kitchen. She was in the garage where my in-laws kept a second refrigerator. Her diaper bag was open on the floor, and she was putting my labeled breast milk bags inside it. I stood in the doorway and asked what she was doing. She jumped and dropped a bag on the floor. She said it wasn't what it looked like. I asked what it looked like because it looked like she was stealing my breast milk. She started crying immediately. She said she wasn't stealing. She said she was borrowing. She said she planned to pay me back when her supply improved. She said her son needed breast milk and she couldn't produce enough and she didn't have any other options. I asked why she didn't just ask me. She said she was embarrassed. She said she didn't want anyone to know she couldn't feed her own baby. She said she figured I had so much I wouldn't even notice. I told her I noticed weeks ago. I told her I thought I was going crazy counting bags that kept disappearing. I told her she took milk I pumped for my daughter without permission, and that wasn't borrowing. That was stealing. She begged me not to tell anyone. She said her husband would be furious. She said my mother-in-law would judge her. She said this would ruin her reputation in the family. I told her she should have thought about that before she took something that didn't belong to her. I left the garage and went back to dinner. I didn't say anything that night because I wanted to think about how to handle it. The next morning, I bought a lock for my freezer. A real lock with a key that only I had. I installed it before the next Sunday dinner. That weekend, Odette showed up with her usual large diaper bag. She disappeared to the kitchen after about an hour. She came back 10 minutes later looking confused. She disappeared again 30 minutes after that. She came back looking panicked. She pulled out her phone and texted me from the bathroom. The message said she needed to talk to me alone before we left. I showed my husband and he said we should hear her out. We waited until everyone was saying goodbye, and then I told Odette I would walk her to her car. Her husband was already buckling their son into his car seat when we got outside. I stood by her driver's side door and asked what she wanted to say. She started crying again and apologized for everything. She said she knew what she did was wrong and she understood if I never forgave her. She said she just wanted me to know she was going to get help and stop lying to everyone. I told her I appreciated that, but I needed some time to think about everything. She nodded and got in her car and drove away. That night, my husband and I talked for hours about what to do next. He said his brother deserved to know what happened because Odette was clearly struggling. I agreed, but I wanted to handle it carefully so we didn't make things worse. We decided I would reach out to Odette the next day and offer to help her find a lactation consultant. If she refused or kept lying, then we would tell her husband ourselves. The next morning, I texted Odette and asked if she was serious about getting help. She responded immediately and said yes. I sent her the name and number of a lactation consultant my pediatrician recommended named Madison. Odette made an appointment for Thursday afternoon and asked if I would come with her. I said yes because I wanted to make sure she actually went through with it. Thursday came, and I met Odette at the lactation consultant's office. Madison greeted us warmly and took us back to a private room. She asked Odette to explain her situation, and Odette told her everything, including the part about stealing my milk. Madison didn't judge her or make her feel bad. She just listened and took notes and asked questions about Odette's son's feeding schedule and weight gain. Then she examined Odette and watched her try to nurse her son. She confirmed that Odette's supply was low and her son's latch needed work. But she also explained there were things Odette could try to increase her production. She talked about different pumping schedules and herbal supplements and staying hydrated. She showed Odette some techniques for helping her son latch better. Odette asked a million questions and took notes on her phone. I could see the relief on her face as Madison explained everything calmly and practically. Then Madison gently brought up the topic of supplementing with formula. She pulled out a growth chart and showed us where Odette's son was tracking compared to other babies his age. He was gaining weight, but slower than he should be. Madison said breast milk was wonderful, but the most important thing was making sure the baby got enough nutrition to grow properly. She suggested Odette consider using formula to supplement while she worked on increasing her own supply. Odette's eyes filled with tears, but this time she didn't get defensive. She asked Madison about different formula brands and whether some were better than others. Madison explained the differences between regular formula and organic options and how to introduce formula alongside breast milk. She said many mothers successfully combined both and their babies did great. Odette asked if using formula meant she was failing as a mother. Madison looked her right in the eye and said absolutely not. She said feeding your baby and keeping them healthy was the definition of good mothering, regardless of how the milk got there. After the appointment, I asked Odette if she wanted to get coffee and talk. We sat in a cafe parking lot with our babies sleeping in their car seats. I told Odette I would give her milk on a regular schedule if she wanted it, but only if we did this the right way with honest communication. No more sneaking around or lying to family. Madison had explained how to safely store and transport donated breast milk, and I was willing to help as long as Odette was honest about what she needed. Odette started crying and thanked me over and over. She said she felt so stupid for not just asking me in the first place. She said the competition and pride had made her act crazy, and she was sorry for violating my trust. I told her I accepted her apology, but it would take time to rebuild what she broke. She said she understood, and she would do whatever it took to make things right. 2 days later, my mother-in-law called me. She said Odette's husband had called her very upset, and she needed to know what was going on. I took a deep breath and explained everything. I told her about catching Odette stealing the milk and installing the lock, and our agreement to move forward with help from the lactation consultant. I told her about Odette's struggles with supply and her refusal to use formula and how desperate she had become. My mother-in-law was quiet for a long time. Then she said she wished Odette had felt safe enough to ask the family for help, instead of resorting to theft. She said she knew Odette and I had a competitive relationship, but she didn't realize how bad things had gotten. She asked what she could do to help now. I told her the best thing she could do was support Odette without judgment and maybe talk to her about why she felt so much pressure to be perfect. The next Sunday dinner was tense at first. Everyone knew something had happened, but only a few people knew the details. We all sat down to eat and made small talk about the babies and the weather. Then my mother-in-law stood up and cleared her throat. She said this family needed to work on communication and supporting each other instead of competing. She looked directly at Odette when she said it, but her tone was loving, not mean. She said everyone struggles sometimes, and asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. She said she wanted this family to be a place where people felt safe being honest about their problems. Odette stood up and apologized to everyone at the table. She said she had been lying about her breastfeeding struggles and had done something she was ashamed of. She didn't give all the details, but she said she was getting help now and learning to be more honest. I saw real relief wash over her face as she sat back down. My father-in-law reached over and squeezed her hand. My brother-in-law put his arm around her shoulders. The tension in the room broke and dinner continued with easier conversation. Over the next 2 weeks, Odette started using a combination of her own milk, the milk I donated to her, and formula for her son. She texted me updates about his weight gain and how much better he was sleeping. At the next Sunday dinner, she pulled me aside and told me she felt like a huge weight had been lifted. She said she had been so stressed trying to maintain an impossible standard that she was making herself and her baby miserable. Now that she had let go of that pressure, she could actually enjoy being a mom. Her son was thriving, and she was sleeping better, and her marriage was improving because she wasn't hiding things anymore. My friend Alexis came over for coffee one afternoon, and I told her the whole story. She listened without interrupting and then said she thought I handled everything really well. She said I was firm about my boundaries, but still offered help once Odette was honest. She said a lot of people would have just cut Odette off completely, or told the whole family right away to embarrass her. I told her I considered both those options, but ultimately I wanted to solve the problem, not just punish Odette. Alexis said that was mature, and she was proud of me. It felt good to have outside validation that I made the right choices. A few weeks later, Odette asked if I wanted to go to a new mother's support group with her. It met every Tuesday night at the community center, and was led by a woman named Brooke Flynn. I agreed to try it out. The first meeting was eye-opening. There were about 12 women there, and every single one had struggled with something related to motherhood. Some had breastfeeding problems like Odette. Others talked about postpartum depression or feeling overwhelmed or fighting with their partners. Hearing other women talk so openly about their struggles seemed to help Odette realize how common these issues were. She started participating in discussions instead of sitting silently. She even shared her own story about the milk theft and how getting honest had changed everything. Several women thanked her for being brave enough to talk about it. One evening, my brother-in-law stopped by my house without calling first. He said he wanted to thank me privately for forcing everything into the open. He said he had no idea how much pressure Odette was putting on herself or how much she was hiding from him. He thought everything was fine because she kept saying it was. Now they were actually talking about their problems and working on them together. He said their marriage was stronger than it had been in months because they were finally being honest with each other. He also apologized for not noticing what his wife was going through sooner. I told him it wasn't his fault, and the important thing was they were dealing with it now. Madison scheduled a follow-up appointment 6 weeks after the first visit. She weighed Odette's son and measured him and checked his development. She was pleased with his progress and told Odette she should be proud of the work she had done. Odette's supply had increased slightly with all the techniques they had been practicing. More importantly, Odette seemed genuinely happy and relaxed for the first time since I had known her. She laughed during the appointment and joked with Madison about how much easier everything felt now that she had let go of trying to be perfect. Madison said that was the real victory. 2 months passed and things between Odette and me kept getting better. One Tuesday afternoon, she texted asking if I wanted to take the babies to the park together. I said yes, and we met at the big park near her house that had the nice playground. We spread blankets on the grass under a tree and set the babies down with some toys. They were both sitting up pretty well now and could grab things and put them in their mouths. My daughter kept trying to steal Odette's son's teething ring, and he didn't seem to mind. We sat there watching them and talking about normal stuff like sleep schedules and introducing solid foods. Odette told me her son loved sweet potatoes but spit out green beans. I told her my daughter was the opposite. We laughed about how different babies could be even though they were born so close together. Nobody was competing anymore. We were just two tired moms sharing stories about our kids. I realized somewhere during that afternoon that we were becoming actual friends, instead of just relatives who had to get along at family dinners. It felt nice to have someone going through the same things at the same time. The next Sunday dinner, my mother-in-law pulled me aside while everyone else was in the living room. She said she wanted to tell me something important. She said she was really proud of how I handled everything with Odette. I asked what she meant, and she admitted she knew something was wrong between us for weeks, but didn't know how to fix it without making things worse. She said she kept hoping we would work it out on our own, but she felt guilty for not stepping in sooner. I told her it was okay, and that sometimes problems need to get really bad before people can fix them properly. She smiled and said sometimes the younger generation has to show the older one how to deal with problems directly instead of pretending everything is fine. She hugged me and said she was grateful I didn't give up on Odette or the family. A few days later, Odette showed up at my house in the middle of the afternoon without calling first. I opened the door and she was holding a wrapped package. She came inside and sat on my couch and handed me the gift. I unwrapped it and found a beautiful photo album with a dark blue cover. Inside were pictures of our babies together from family dinners and the park visits. She had printed them all out and arranged them carefully with little captions about what was happening in each photo. On the first page, she wrote an inscription in her handwriting, thanking me for helping her become a better mother and a better person. She said she would never forget what I did for her and her son. We both started crying, but this time they were happy tears instead of the angry, scared ones from before. I hugged her and told her I was glad we got through it together. The following week, both babies had checkups scheduled on the same day. Kevin saw them one after the other in his office. He's Madison's husband, and he's been a pediatrician for like 10 years. He measured both babies and weighed them and checked all their development milestones. He told Odette her son was thriving and gaining weight perfectly now. He said she should be really proud of herself for seeking help and doing what was best for her baby even though it was hard. Odette's face lit up with the biggest smile I'd ever seen on her. She thanked him about 5 times before we left. Sunday dinners became something I actually looked forward to instead of dreading. Odette and I would swap baby clothes that our kids had outgrown. She gave me a bunch of cute onesies her son couldn't wear anymore, and I gave her some dresses my daughter had only worn once. Our husbands started joking about how their wives finally got along after all those months of tension. My father-in-law said the babies really were growing up like siblings, just like everyone predicted back when we were both pregnant. 3 months after the whole freezer lock situation, I noticed I was pumping less milk. My daughter was eating more solid foods now and nursing less often. I still had extra milk most days, but not the huge amounts from before. Odette was still accepting donations from me when I had extra, and she always thanked me like it was the biggest gift in the world. But now she was also bringing me things to help me out. She made freezer meals for my family twice a month and dropped them off with cute labels on each container. She offered to babysit my daughter whenever I needed a break or wanted to go out with my husband. At the Tuesday support group meeting, Odette raised her hand during sharing time. Brooke called on her, and Odette told everyone her story about stealing my breast milk and how finally admitting her struggles changed everything. She talked about how scared she was to ask for help and how much better life got once she stopped trying to be perfect. Several other mothers in the group thanked her afterwards for being so honest. They said they had been hiding similar problems and felt less alone hearing her story. Brooke pulled Odette aside after the meeting and asked if she would be willing to mentor new mothers who joined the group and were struggling with supply problems. Odette agreed right away. 4 months later, our families were closer than we'd ever been, and both babies were healthy and happy. Odette and I could actually laugh about the whole situation now. She joked that I should have installed that freezer lock weeks earlier and saved everyone a lot of drama. We started planning a joint first birthday party for the babies since their birthdays were only 3 weeks apart. We argued about whether to do a farm theme or a woodland creatures theme, but it was friendly arguing, not the mean competitive stuff from before. Then we got into a debate about who could make the better smash cake for the babies to destroy. My husband rolled his eyes and said, "Here we go again," but he was smiling. Life was really good now.